This is the untold tale of healthcare's hidden champions, the radiology technicians. While doctors take the spotlight with diagnoses and treatments, these unsung experts work tirelessly behind the scenes, capturing intricate images that reveal the body's deepest secrets. In the dynamic world of Radiation House, these technicians carefully scan every inch of a patient's body, providing essential insights that lead to precise diagnoses. Their expertise forms the backbone of patient care, though their invaluable role often goes unacknowledged. The story unfolds in a bustling hospital, where 28-year-old radiology technician Igarashi is deeply absorbed in analyzing a CT scan on his tablet. His concentration is abruptly broken by the angry shouts of a doctor, calling his name with increasing frustration. Oblivious to the doctor's growing irritation, Igarashi turns to find the doctor seething, under the impression that he's been purposefully ignored. Boiling with anger, the doctor commands Igarashi to immediately review an MRI scan of Professor Ijuin's brain, a task heavy with pressure, knowing that even the smallest mistake could lead to catastrophic consequences, especially when dealing with someone as prominent as Professor Ijuin. Igarashi's apparent nonchalance only fuels the doctor's fury. To Igarashi, his job is simply to capture images, but the doctor, now on edge, sharply reminds him that his role extends far beyond taking pictures. He's also responsible for analyzing the images and offering critical insights, just like a seasoned radiologist. After sharing his opinion, the doctor snaps at Igarashi, suspecting condescension. Before Igarashi can explain his confusion, mentioning that some doctors dislike technicians for not knowing their place, he's interrupted. The doctor, exasperated, clarifies that he respects technicians and asked Igarashi precisely for his insights. As Igarashi turns to examine the MRI, the doctor finds him oddly difficult to engage. When Igarashi notes that the shadows on the MRI are simply blood vessels, the doctor smirks at the obviousness, joking that everyone already knows that. With a grin, he talks bad about the professor, calling him an old geezer who won't stop talking without reassurance that his brain's fine. But Igarashi interrupts deadpan, remarking that the MRI isn't of the professor, since the professor's brain would be much smaller than the large one displayed on the screen. The initially confused doctor starts laughing, assuming it's all a joke. But when he glances toward the door, he becomes tense, sweating nervously as he realizes Professor Ijuin himself is standing there, overhearing everything. Completely unaware of the professor's presence, Igarashi continues speaking without noticing. The professor, with a sly grin, as though catching someone red-handed, playfully asks from behind whose brain he is discussing. Still unaware, Igarashi repeats that it's not Professor Ijuin's brain on the MRI, noting that the professor's brain must be smaller, perhaps an early sign of cerebral atrophy. When Igarashi finally turns and spots Professor Ijuin standing right behind him, the professor grins and asks his name. Learning that Igarashi, a radiology technician, has been messing around with a radiologist, the professor taps his shoulder and jokingly questions if Igarashi's wise judgment really determined that his brain is smaller than average. Laughing, the professor calls him a comedian. Igarashi chuckles awkwardly but faces the consequence of the exchange. Sitting alone in the park at night, Igarashi feels utterly hopeless after being fired. The weight of his depression bears down on him, making him feel powerless, especially as he reflects on his inability to pick up on others' emotions, even the most obvious ones. He recalls the recent incident. By the time he understood, it was too late. He tries to convince himself that he can understand others' emotions eventually, but only after they're explicitly explained to him. He analyzes situations after the fact, but it feels pointless since he can never recognize these cues before it's too late. Sinking deeper into despair, he contemplates quitting the field altogether, aiming for a job that involves zero interaction. However, a memory from his childhood flashes through his mind. He remembers playing with a little girl and her dog in the park. One day, they found an injured stray dog. The girl immediately removed her sock to wrap the dog's wounded leg, determined to nurse it back to health. But realizing she already had 3 other strays at home, she hesitated. Looking at Igarashi with hopeful eyes, she suggested they care for the dog together. Although he was embarrassed and flustered, he eagerly agreed. With a tender smile, she told the dog it would be her first patient, as she dreamed of becoming a doctor like her father. Motivated by the memory, he decides to give it one last try. He checks the job listings at Amakasu General Hospital, the very place where his childhood friend, Dr. Amakasu-en, now works. To his astonishment, there's an open position for a radiology technician, an opportunity he's never seen before. Overjoyed, Igarashi rushes to apply, but in his excitement, he accidentally bumps into an old man taking photos in the park. Concerned, Igarashi asks if the old man is alright, but the man, with a kind smile, reassures him that everything's fine and his camera isn't broken. Igarashi notices the breathtaking photo of the night sky the old man had captured. During their conversation, the old man shared that he used a 5th magnitude lens with an ISO between 200 and 400 to capture the stars. Suddenly, he feels a headache that's lingered since yesterday. Concerned, Igarashi urges him to visit nearby Amakasu General Hospital, advising him not to ignore his symptoms. Realizing he still needs to call a hospital for his interview, he rushes off but looks back one last time to remind the old man to get checked. The old man chuckles, finding Igarashi's concern endearing even as he stumbles again, this time hit by a football kicked by nearby kids. Impressed by his ability to recognize a 5th magnitude star, the old man can't help but admire his keen eye. At the hospital, he nervously walks alongside Hirose Hirono, a 21-year-old radiology technician on her first day. Though she tries to calm his nerves, reminding him he's worked at other hospitals before and should be used to interviews, Igarashi can't shake his anxiety. This isn't just any job. This is his chance to fulfill a childhood promise to work alongside Dr. Ann, and he can't afford a single mistake. So consumed by his thoughts, Igarashi doesn't even realize he's walked past the interview room. Hirose watches in shock as he continues down the corridor, lost in his nerves. She calls out to him just as they enter the room, where they're greeted by 22-year-old radiology technician Yuki Rin, expressionlessly eating while fiddling with a circuit board. When Hirose, curious, asks about the circuits, Yuki gives a flat response, saying he's just eating. But when Hirose hesitantly asks why he's staring at the circuits, he teases her, saying he's simply admiring them like a Renaissance painting. Kurohane Tamaki interrupts, reassuring Hirose that Yuki is just a bit of a geek, easing the tension with her friendly demeanor. While bowing humbly, Hirose assures Kurohane that she will do her best to help the patients. Smiling, she playfully remarks that Hirose is all fired up, then jokes about how nice it is to be young. However, Hirose quickly corrects her, explaining she's already 21 years old, and Kurohane teasingly calls her childish. Hirose feels uneasy when radiology technician Nokishida Goro, age 34, suddenly interrupts by hitting both of them on the head. Kurohane scolds him for sneaking into their conversation, grabbing him by the hair and laughing as she mocks him, saying no one pays him any attention. Begging her to let go, Goro squirms and Hirose becomes frightened by the chaos. Her anxiety only deepens when she notices another technician, Inu, staring blankly at her. Kurohane reassures her that Inu didn't even notice her. Kurohane then introduces Hirose to Inu, whose emotionless, mysterious demeanor makes her even more nervous. Kurohane blushes, finding Inu oddly charming despite his weirdness. When Hirose asks about him, Kurohane smirks, calling Inu a man of mystery. Hirose, surrounded by such peculiar colleagues, feels overwhelmed, especially noticing Igarashi, still glued to his tablet, seemingly lost in his own world. Suddenly, Igarashi shouts in excitement as radiology doctor Amakasu Han, age 28, enters the room. With an unwavering poker face, she marches in with a file in hand. The sight of her, so mature compared to the childhood version he remembers, stirs up Igarashi's emotions, bringing him to tears. His emotions escalate when he notices she's not wearing a ring, signaling she's still unmarried. His over-the-top reaction earns him a furious glare from Anne, leaving Hirose feeling slightly relieved that the attention has shifted away from her. Head radiology technician Onodera welcomes the new recruits with a cigarette in hand. Hirose relaxes slightly as Kaburaji Yasutomi, the 55-year-old head radiologist, introduces himself and emphasizes the key role technicians play, encouraging Hirose and Igarashi to give their best. When Kaburaji asks Dr. N to speak, Igarashi feels thrilled, eager to remind her of a childhood promise, but she bluntly tells them to follow protocol, leaving Igarashi heartbroken by her indifference. Meanwhile, the photographer, relieved after an exam for his migraine, is advised to get an MRI. Later, Dr. Ann, doubting Igarashi's abilities, confides in Dean Omarin Nagisa, who reassures her, noting Igarashi's reputation as a highly regarded radiologist in the USA. Dr. Ann, puzzled, presses the dean for details. Smiling, the dean asks if she knows Professor Piers, the top radiologist in the U.S. When it confirms, the dean recalls a lecture by Piers at Washington University's School of Medicine. wherein had taken a radiologic interpretation course. To Anne's surprise, she learns Igarashi attended the same lecture and impressed peers by answering a notoriously difficult diagnostic question. Stunned, Anne starts to reconsider her judgment of Igarashi, as his rough exterior doesn't match his accomplishments. The dean, still smiling, advises her not to be too quick to judge, assuring her that Igarashi's skills will shine when it counts. Still, she remains skeptical. Meanwhile, the photographer, on his way to the MRI, suddenly collapses from intense pain. A nearby nurse rushes to his aid, bringing him into the emergency room. While the dean is still attempting to convince Dr. Anne, he emphasizes that in Japan, surgeons and general practitioners are given more importance, while radiologists and pathologists often go unnoticed by the public. She is already aware that the general public assumes that the doctor who greets them also performs their CT scans and MRIs. The dean further informs her that in the United States, radiologists are regarded with the same esteem as head doctors and surgeons because a hospital's quality is largely determined by the accuracy of the diagnosis made by these specialists. Even though the hospital relies heavily on doctors, the true strength of a hospital lies in its radiologists, who ensure precise scans. Respectfully, the dean reminds Dr. Anne of her father, who had been the dean of the hospital before his health declined. He had always placed great importance on radiology, ensuring it received due attention alongside running the hospital. Dr. Anne admires her father deeply, as he inspired her to pursue a medical career. However, she can't help but express her frustration about technicians, claiming they simply follow a manual and press a button to capture images, remarking that even monkeys could do this task. Meanwhile, chaos erupts as everyone is alarmed by the photographer's unconscious state, urgently needing his CT and MRI scans. When the MRI results arrive, Hirose is horrified at what appears to be the photographer's brain melting. Upon seeing bright lines on the CT scan, she becomes even more anxious about his health. However, another senior technician calms her down, explaining that the scan was likely disrupted by metal artifacts, possibly due to his having metal inside his body. As Dr. Anne and Dr. Kaburagi examine Kikujima's brain MRI, head technician Onodera explains that Kikujima's metal tooth implant, placed after a toothache during a South America trip, is interfering with the MRI and CT scans, obstructing a clear view. Dr. Anne spots a darkened region in the MRI and warns Dr. Kaburagi that any potential lesion could be hidden within the artifact-covered area. When Kaburagi suggests treating the famous photographer with extra care, Dr. Anne furiously insists on treating every patient equally. Onodera regretfully informs Dr. Anne that they cannot use contrast agents due to Kikujima's allergy, and their facility lacks a maxillofacial department to remove the implant. Frustrated, Dr. Anne recalls Dean Umori's confidence in Igarashi's capabilities for complex cases. Meanwhile, Dean Umori contacts Professor Ijuin, who now regrets firing Igarashi after realizing he dismissed a truly skilled radiologist who had previously identified an MRI error in one glance. Hirose, observing Igarashi's unpolished demeanor, wonders if there's more to him than meets the eye, as Igarashi considers telling Anne that he changed his name, which explains why she no longer recognizes him. As Dr. Anne walks dejectedly down the corridor, Igarashi spots her and eagerly calls out, addressing her as Anne and revealing his actual name, Kubota Iori. She freezes, startled by his familiarity, but doesn't respond, merely casting him a confused look before continuing down the hall. Just as she walks away, she pauses, noticing something fall, only to see his leg sticking out from a nearby room. Realizing she doesn't recognize him, Igarashi lets out a sigh of relief. Quickly hiding in the nearest room to avoid further suspicion, he coincidentally finds himself in the room of Kikujima, a world-renowned photographer. Upon recognizing the man, Igarashi feels a strange sense of fate guiding him to this hospital and greets him warmly. Kikujima is in the middle of admiring a photograph, and when Igarashi asks about it, Kikujima proudly explains that it's a shot of the night sky over Sailor de Uyuni in Bolivia, a place where, once a year, the salt flats reflect the stars, making them appear to stretch across both heaven and earth. Igarashi is captivated by the shot, especially by the stars in the photo that can't be seen with the naked eye. Relaxing in bed, Kikujima reminisces about the effort it took to capture that photograph, which went on to win a major competition. He recalls the warm welcome he received from locals when he visited Bolivia last year. Worried he may be boring Igarashi, he apologizes, but Igarashi reassures him with interest. Kikujima then shares a meaningful quote from The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry: "What is truly important is hidden from the eyes." Inspired by this philosophy, Kikujima says he has since devoted himself to capturing hidden beauty like the stars. He then reveals his excitement and anxiety about his daughter's upcoming wedding, which he hopes to photograph at Sailor di Uyuni. Yet his worsening headaches and the interference from his silver tooth implant in the MRI scans leave him worried he won't be able to fulfill this promise. Admitting he ignored his headaches to focus on his daughter's big day, he now fears he may have made a dangerous mistake. Moved by Kikujima's words, Igarashi decides to personally review his MRI scan, determined to find a way to reduce the interference caused by the metal implant. A fellow technician warns him of the risks, reminding him that any mistake would fall squarely on his shoulders. Igarashi, however, remains undeterred, explaining that Dean Umori has granted him special permission to adjust the MRI machine's settings. Ignoring the senior technician's reprimands, Igarashi carefully adjusts the machine, aiming to lessen the effect of the implant on the images. Meanwhile, in Dean Umori's office, Dr. N storms in, furious that Igarashi has been allowed to work on Kikujima's scan without her knowledge. Already tense over the delicate nature of the case, her frustration reaches a breaking point when she receives an urgent call informing her that Kikujima's condition has worsened. He is suffering from a severe headache, which could be a sign of an impending rupture, potentially life-threatening. Her anxiety spikes as she realizes that without a clear MRI, she's left with few options to prevent a crisis. Desperate, Dr. N orders the team to proceed with a contrast agent, despite knowing Kikujima is allergic. She argues that the risk of an aneurysm rupture is too great, and time is slipping away. Onodera, the head technician, hesitates, reminding her that Kikujima's allergy makes the procedure dangerous. Dr. N, now at the end of her patience, snaps that as a technician, Onodera has no authority over patient care. Her sharp tone makes her determination clear. Preventing the rupture is her top priority. Senior Dr. Kaburagi, backing her decision, instructs Onodera to prepare everything as ordered, emphasizing that Kikujima is her patient, and they have no choice but to act quickly. Simultaneously, Igarashi continues his intense focus on the MRI, attempting to work around the metal interference. He remembers Kikujima's advice about seeing beyond the visible and feels himself metaphorically floating through the waves of data on the screen. Suddenly inspired, he reconfigures the machine to capture a phase image, making the interference from the silver tooth visible in a new way. Using this information, Igarashi reconstructs the scan, piecing together data that's typically discarded as artifacts. Meanwhile, in the intervention room, Onodera informs Dr. Ann that everything is ready. She stands with a mixture of anxiety and determination, knowing that this decision is their last option. The senior doctor steps out for a moment, needing a break from the tension. In the MRI room, Igarashi finally achieves a breakthrough. To the astonishment of the other technicians, he has successfully obtained a clear image. Just as Dr. Kaburagi returns from his break, he's stunned to see the scan on the screen. Igarashi explains that he used phase data to reconstruct Kikujima's scan, working around the interference from the metal implant. Kaburagi examines the image closely, relieved to see that the headaches are not from an aneurysm rupture. As Dr. N leaves the intervention room, still frustrated, she spots Igarashi, and he calmly asks her to review the completed scan. She stops in shock as he reveals the cause of Kikujima's symptoms, a parasitic infection which usually infects the lungs but can migrate to the brain, leading to headaches, vomiting, and seizures. Igarashi explains that Kikujima likely contracted it from eating raw crabs in Bolivia. Though skeptical at first, Dr. Kaburagi orders blood tests to confirm the diagnosis. Technician Onodera, impressed by Igarashi's accomplishment, starts to praise him, only to be silenced by a withering glare from Dr. Ann. However, her anger is mixed with shame when Dr. Kaburagi points out that following her initial plan would have endangered Kikujima's career and damaged the hospital's reputation. Igarashi, discussing the outcome with Onodera, grows glum when Dr. Ann storms away, her glare hinting at unresolved tension. The following day, Igarashi receives a heartfelt thank you letter from Kikujima, expressing his gratitude for allowing him to attend his daughter's wedding. Enclosed with the letter is a breathtaking photo of the wedding, set under a sky full of stars. Later, Dean Omori reads about Kikujima winning the prestigious World Graphic Gold Prize for the photo. She praises Dr. Kaburagi, who explains that the blood tests confirmed Igarashi's diagnosis, sparing Kikujima from unnecessary surgery and allowing him to capture the prize-winning image. Kaburaji insists, however, that the credit truly belongs to Igarashi. Reflecting on this, Dean recalls telling Dr. Ann about Igarashi's brilliance, including how he had once impressed Professor Pyers in the U.S., who offered him a position in his lab. Igarashi declined the offer, choosing to remain in Japan as a technician. Although he has all the qualifications to work as a doctor and receives job offers from around the world, he insists on staying in his current role. Now, Dean Umori resolves to encourage him to embrace his full potential as a doctor. Standing on a bridge with his tablet, Igarashi remembers a conversation from childhood when Dr. Ann, aspiring to follow her father's path in radiology, shyly asked him to become a technician to support her journey. Though he was confused then, he now understands the weight of her request. The scene shifts to Shiru, a 32-year-old man, and his wife Maki, who are engrossed in a video game where they battle a massive dragon-breathing fire. After triumphing together, they share a cheerful celebration. Shiru glances at the clock as the game ends, realizing it's already 5 a.m. Maki, feeling guilty, apologizes for keeping him up all night, knowing he has work. With a smile, he reassures her, joking that as Hilda, the white mage, it's his duty to support her, Maximum, the strongest warrior. Touched by his kindness, she affectionately offers to make breakfast for him as a token of gratitude. While in the kitchen, she smiles warmly, thanking him for his thoughtfulness. He, however, insists she should rest, reminding her about her upcoming medical checkup. This makes him reflect somberly on their blissful 4-year marriage, filled with nights of gaming and joy. His heart aches, recalling how everything changed when they learned about the lump in her breast from a recent checkup. Meanwhile, Dr. Ann, after finishing her morning jog, reaches her house and is greeted by her mother, who expresses concern over her work. With a gentle smile, Dr. Ann reassures her mother to focus on taking care of her father. However, her mother, noticing Ann's exhausted face, advises her to rest more, fearing for her well-being. Dr. Ann brushes it off, claiming jogging builds stamina, but later, while showering, she catches a glimpse of her weary skin and starts to worry about her own health. As she changes clothes, she reflects on her demanding schedule, having worked tirelessly on mammography due to a shortage of radiologists and oncologists, all while carrying the burden of keeping the hospital's machines operational. At the hospital, Igarashi sits on a bench, staring at his tablet when Dean Omori approaches him with concern. She questions why he, a licensed doctor, is working as a technician. Igarashi explains that he prefers working in a technical role, despite her suggestion that he could fill the hospital's need for more radiologists. Respectfully declining, Igarashi reveals he's fulfilling a promise to only work as a technician. Umori, after hearing this, stands up, smiling as she cryptically remarks that someone who sees too much can't remain silent for long. This leaves Igarashi confused, already feeling overwhelmed by his current responsibilities. In the radiology department, senior technician Onodera gathers the staff, including Hirose, to prepare for their shifts. New recruits are instructed to familiarize themselves with the machines. Technician Tamaki offers to guide Hirose and demonstrates the mammography machine, explaining its use of low-dose X-rays to detect breast cancer early. Hirose, taking diligent notes, listens attentively as Tamaki details the process, including the 0.05 to 0.15 millisieverts radiation dose. However, when Tamaki mentions that the breast must be compressed with 120 newtons of force, Hirose visibly tenses. Tamaki, noticing her discomfort, jokes about experiencing the procedure firsthand to understand it better. Later in the hospital's waiting area, Maki and Shiru sit anxiously, with Shiru trying to comfort his wife. Maki, fearful that her checkup will confirm she has breast cancer, clings to his words. As they wait, they are distracted by a loud argument at the reception desk. A woman named Chiba Misako is pleading for her son to be seen by a doctor, as his legs are hurting. The receptionist, apologetic, explains that all slots are fully booked, and the earliest appointment is in 2 days. The tense atmosphere only heightens Maki's anxiety as they are called to the radiology department. Inside the mammography room, Maki nervously stands as Hirose prepares to conduct the scan under Tamaki's supervision. As the scan proceeds, Tamaki instructs Hirose on the process, but then notices something unusual. Upon closer inspection, she informs Hirose that Maki has breast implants, which the scan cannot conceal. Just as she's about to examine further, they are interrupted by a knock on the door. Senior technician Onodera enters, informing Tamaki she's needed in angiography. He assigns Hirose to continue with Maki's mammogram, despite her inexperience. Feeling overwhelmed, Hirose hesitates, and Onodera calls Igarashi over to assist, as the other technicians are occupied with Chiba Misako's examination. Without hesitation, Igarashi enters the mammography room, typing swiftly on the keyboard as per Onodera's instructions. With no visible emotion, he moves to examine Maki, but she immediately recoils, shouting in fear and hiding herself. In the tense moment, as Maki screams, Technician Hirose quickly grabs Igarashi to stop him from approaching her. Just then, Dr. N storms into the room, her eyes widening at the chaotic scene. Misreading the situation, she jumps to conclusions and furiously lashes out at Igarashi. He tries to explain, but Maki, visibly shaken, retreats further into the room, casting worried glances. Dr. N, now apologizing to Maki through the closed door, reassures her that Igarashi will face the consequences. Turning back to him, she demands, her voice cold and unforgiving, that he leave the room immediately. Feeling a deep sadness and regret, he quietly exits, realizing Dr. N's disappointment in him. Hirose reassures Maki, guiding her calmly to the scan. As she follows Technician Hirose's instructions, she hesitantly steps forward to undergo the mammogram. With some uncertainty, Hirose applies 120 newtons of force to Maki's chest using the foot gauge, noticing her patient's worried expression. Concerned, she asks Maki if she's feeling all right. Meanwhile, Igarashi sits gloomily on a chair outside, feeling the weight of the situation. A senior technician approaches and, with a smirk, teases Igarashi about the situation. However, Igarashi's revelation that he has been banished as punishment leaves the technician confused. After completing the mammogram, Hirose, smiling gratefully, thanked Maki for her patience and instructed her to wait in the corridor after changing back into her clothes. Feeling a sense of pride for successfully completing her first mammogram, Hirose's moment of satisfaction is interrupted by a knock at the door. The senior technician enters, jokingly lying that Igarashi begged him to check if Hirose was performing the scan correctly. His teasing escalates, but Hirose, with newfound confidence, assures him that everything is fine and only one patient remains. Ignoring him, she calmly instructs the next patient to prepare for the mammography. Upon seeing the name Kindori Shinobu, a 28-year-old man, Hirose is visibly puzzled. Technician Tamaka reassures her with a calm explanation, noting that while it's uncommon, men can also develop breast cancer, and every so often, they receive male patients for mammograms. Meanwhile, in the interpretation room, Dr. N is carefully examining a CT scan of a patient who slipped in the shower, hitting his head. The initial results suggest cerebral hemorrhage, but Dr. N expresses skepticism. Despite the machine's diagnosis, she observes no visible signs of bleeding. Instead, she suspects the patient may have suffered a cerebral infarction due to a blockage in the left middle cerebral artery, which is likely caused by blood clots. This blockage could explain his sudden loss of consciousness, leading to the fall. Dr. N advises the team to conduct a diffusion weight MRI to quickly pinpoint the infarct area. Acting promptly could enable them to treat the stroke with medication in its early stages. After ending the call and reviewing the scanning schedule, Dr. N notices one last mammogram is pending. Upon seeing Maki's name, she's instantly filled with anger, recalling the moment Igarashi nearly touched Maki during the exam. Already suspicious of him and seeing him as a constant troublemaker, this memory fuels her growing frustration. As she reviews Maki's scan, Dr. N spots something unusual, a 2 cm lump in the AC region of Maki's right breast, which she suspects may be malignant. In her report, she strongly recommends an ultrasound for further examination. At the Hirota household, Maki sits dejectedly on the couch, her head hanging low. The moment Shiru arrives and announces he's home, she leaps up and embraces him tightly, tears streaming down her face. In between sobs and broken words, she tells him about the report, which indicates that the lump in her breast could be cancerous. Shiru, equally worried, tries to remain calm and reassures her as they sit together on the sofa. He explains that breast cancer is common, affecting 1 in 12 people, but Maki is still deeply distressed since both hospitals hinted at the high likelihood of malignancy. The weight of the situation begins to crush them both. Shiru hugs her tighter, gently reminding her that even if it's cancer, it's a good thing they caught it early, it can be treated. Despite his comforting words, Maki breaks down further, anxious that the lump is already sizable and fearing the wait for her next checkup may be too long. Shiru, still holding her, tries desperately to console her, but her fears are overwhelming. As Maki falls asleep in his lap, Shiru feels utterly helpless. He gazes at photos from their childhood, lost in thought. He remembers those early days when, unlike other girls, 9-year-old Maki spent her time playing video games. With limited hours to play, she'd visit him every day, using the name Maximum in the games. Even as they entered middle school, Maki continued to visit, indulging in her love for gaming. Shiru often glanced at her during those moments, developing feelings for her but always reminding himself they were just gaming friends. Trying to win her over and pushed by his folks because of his bulky physique, he decided to give judo a go, thinking it might sway her opinion. Determined to give judo his best effort, Shiru quickly rose to the top of his school district, becoming unbeatable in his weight class. This newfound success gave him a bit more confidence around Maki. However, his natural shyness and lack of courage led to relentless teasing from his peers. Overwhelmed, he quit judo when he entered high school, falsely telling Maki that he quit due to an injury. Content with just being her game friend, he hid his feelings and avoided confronting his emotions. Everything changed when they went to different universities. Shiru realized Maki had grown far beyond his reach. While she was working as a writer for gaming magazines and excelling in university, he had become a salesman. Despite his efforts, he struggled to adapt to his job, and whispers of his incompetence haunted him. Every morning, he dreaded waking up, feeling worn out by the reality that life wasn't going his way. Seeking refuge, he escaped into the world of online games, where the anonymity and distance between players felt comforting. One day, while playing, he came across a girl under attack by a terrifying monster. Without hesitation, he rushed in and defeated the creature, saving her just in time. The girl thanked him, and Shiru instantly recognized her familiar playstyle. It was Maki, Hilda in the game. She recognized him too, and just like that, they were reunited in the virtual world. Not long after, Shiru mustered the courage to propose to Maki in real life. To his shock, she immediately accepted with a bright smile. Dumbfounded, he couldn't understand why she, who seemed so far out of his league, would want to marry him. She playfully explained that he reminded her of her favorite game character, then with a grin, told him he better protect her properly in real life. In the present, as she sleeps peacefully in his lap, Shiru is overwhelmed with tears. He feels guilty for not being able to protect her, even though he noticed her symptoms early on. Yet he's filled with helplessness because they must wait 4 agonizing months to see a breast cancer specialist at a reputable hospital. Determined to do something, Shiru decides to seek help. The next day, he stands in front of Amakasa General Hospital, nervously hoping someone can offer assistance. As he stares at the hospital, lost in thought, he suddenly feels a jolt. He's been accidentally bumped by Igarashi, who wasn't paying attention, engrossed in his tablet. Igarashi immediately apologizes profusely, leaving Shiru even more confused. Shiru turns around and notices a scan on Igarashi's tablet. Shiru asks if he's a doctor. Igarashi clarifies he's a radiologist and explains his role in taking X-rays and CT scans. Though not a doctor, his involvement in the medical field gives Shiru hope. Desperate for help, he clutches his shoulders, pleading for him to listen. Puzzled but willing, he sits with Shiru on a nearby bench, listening as Shiru shares his wife Maki's recent breast cancer diagnosis. He explains how they're forced to wait months for a specialist appointment, his anxiety intensifying as he fears her condition might worsen. Overcome by the weight of his fears, Shiru breaks down, his voice shaking with the thought of losing her. Seeing his distress, Igarashi places a comforting hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him down. He gently reassures Shiru, offering to listen and be there for him during this difficult time. Shiru continues to share with Igarashi about his relationship with Maki, starting from their childhood. He describes their bond as being like Beauty and the Beast, with Maki being the beautiful one while he sees himself as quite the opposite. Even after marrying her, he has always felt like all the happiness in his life came from Maki, and he never earned it through hard work. Smiling softly, he confesses that Maki is his entire world. Yet whenever he tells others about his deep love for her, they mock him, saying he'd be fine on his own, that he has to live his own life without depending on her. As Igarashi listens, he is reminded of his own feelings for Dr. Ann, and tears begin to well up in his eyes. He understands Shiru's emotions deeply. Seeing that Igarashi is truly listening and not making fun of him, Shiru feels a connection with him. They formally introduce themselves to each other, realizing that neither has had anyone to share such feelings with before. While they talk, Dr. Ann passed by and notices Igarashi speaking with someone, looking puzzled. Meanwhile, Igarashi opens up, smiling as he shares that he also likes someone and wants to help her. His journey to become the best radiologist led him to obtain a medical license, train abroad, and return with the dream of excelling in his field. But before he could finish, Shiru interrupts, shocked that Igarashi has a medical license, which technically makes him a doctor. Igarashi quickly asks Shiru to keep this a secret, as it would complicate his role as a radiologist if people knew. Shiru listens anxiously as Igarashi explains the healthcare system's challenges, where patients often wait months for clear diagnosis, sometimes leading them to desperation. Shiru's face falls, feeling the weight of his helplessness deepen. Noticing Shiru's distress, Igarashi makes a bold choice, despite Dr. An's warning to avoid the mammography room. With a humble tone, Igarashi offers to personally check on Maki's condition. Though confused at first, Shiru soon understands, gripping Igarashi's hand with renewed hope. Igarashi feels uplifted by Shiru's relief, but he catches Dr. N watching them from the corridor, silently weighing his decision. As night falls and the hospital staff thins out, Igarashi sits in the radiology room, examining Maki's mammogram. He notices what appears to be a spiculated mass, a troubling sign, but decides to scan her again for a more thorough assessment. Meanwhile, Shiru anxiously waits in the corridor. Igarashi asks Maki's permission for another scan. Carefully, he flattens the tissue to avoid overlapping that might obscure the results. He reassures her throughout, acknowledging the discomfort but stressing the importance of accuracy for her diagnosis. After completing the scan, Igarashi gathers Shiru and Maki to review the findings. He points out the skin dimpling and the spiculated mass, which measures just over 2 centimeters in her right breast, sparking concern that it could be cancer. Both of them get tense. However, Igarashi calmly explains that, while the lump appears threatening at first, the scan reveals something different. Thanks to the pressure applied during the imaging, the scan shows that the lump has no core and shares the same density as normal breast tissue. There are no other symptoms concerning them, suggesting that this is not cancer. With a sense of relief, he further clarifies that Maki's lump is a radial sclerosing lesion, a benign condition, not malignant. Both Shiru and Maki are taken aback but visibly relaxed, relieved that the situation may not be as dire as they had feared. Mr. and Mrs. Haruta burst into joyful shouts when Igarashi informs them that there's no need to worry. He calmly explains that while a core biopsy is still necessary for safety, the previous scan's unclear results were due to improper pressure applied, which led to the initial diagnostic failure. Overwhelmed with relief, Haruta begins to cry, and Maki feels a deep sense of safety, knowing how much he cares for her. The next day, senior technician Onodera is smoking while reviewing shift reports when Dr. N storms in, angrily snatching the cigarette from his hand and reminding him that smoking is prohibited in the hospital. Unfazed, Onodera lights another cigarette, saying his tough routine has made it hard for him to cope lately. As they examine the previous night's reports, they note 15 X-rays, 4 CTs, and 1 MRI. They are surprised when technician Tamaki mentions a mammogram was also performed. Dr. Ann and Onodera are taken aback as they review the mammogram, admiring its textbook perfect symmetry and clear inframammary fold, IMF. However, Dr. Ann feels a mix of worry and embarrassment when Tamaki points out that the core has low density, suggesting possible fibrosis. This revelation shocks her since she diagnosed the patient with cancer the previous day. Now confident that cancer isn't present, she's stunned by the accurate scan of the radial sclerosing lesion, RSL, a condition she had only read about in textbooks but never encountered as a doctor. When she asks who performed the mammogram, her embarrassment deepens upon discovering it was none other than Igarashi. On her way home, Dr. N ponders the situation, feeling conflicted. Meanwhile, Igarashi contemplates the likely follow-up from his actions, fearing Dr. N will hate him even more for disregarding her orders to stay out of the mammography room. Yet despite the potential consequences, he feels an overwhelming sense of joy knowing he brought happiness to Mr. and Mrs. Haruta. Later, at the Haruta household, the couple is enjoying a game together, and Maki cheers happily as they win the round faster than expected. When he suggests playing another game, Maki gazes at him with affection and gently insists they take a rest after such an emotional day. As they lie in bed, Maki silently calls to him in her thoughts, confessing to herself just how much she loves his kindness. Though she decides never to reveal these feelings aloud until he realizes them on his own, she hugs him tightly, filled with joy and comfort, whispering that she's simply happy to have him by her side. The next day, at the bustling Saltaire restaurant, the lively chatter of customers fills the air as a large crowd gathers. A table has been reserved for the radiology department of Amakasu General Hospital, where all the staff from the department are gathering. Senior technician Tamaki, visibly irritated, turns to Hirose and Igarashi, questioning why they both look so downcast despite this being their welcome party. With a hopeful tone, Hirose anxiously asks if Dr. Amakasu is coming, and Tamaki, sipping water, confirms that although she rarely attends such parties, she's coming today because she needs to speak with them. This sends a wave of dread through both Hirose and Igarashi, as they fear her impending scolding. Hirose nervously assumes that Dr. Ann will reprimand her for the faulty scans that led to an incorrect diagnosis, while Igarashi is haunted by his last confrontation with Dr. Ann. He recalls the moment she angrily warned him to stay out of the mammography room, a warning he blatantly ignored by conducting another scan the previous night. He now expects to face serious consequences. Noticing Hirose's anxious expression and her slightly tight outfit, Goro grows irritated, though his thoughts drift away when Onodera, drink in hand, asks about technician Inu's absence. Goro informs him that Inu is occupied with something today and won't be attending the gathering. Suddenly, Dr. N makes her entrance, casually dressed but feeling slightly late due to her prior meeting with Dinu Mori. As she steps inside, she is surprised to spot technician Inu Kei sitting with a group of schoolgirls, prompting her to silently hope he's not getting involved in anything improper, as she is deeply concerned about his behavior while working under her supervision. As the conversation around the table continues, Hirose offers Yuki a drink. When he requests ginger ale, it becomes apparent that he isn't fond of alcohol. Hirose, surprised by this, expresses concern, and Yuki calmly explains that he avoids alcohol because it leads to intoxication, further elaborating that alcohol paralyzes the brain when dissolved into the bloodstream. Listening to this detailed explanation, Tamaki, her face flushing with amusement, smiles and teases him, remarking how adorable he looks when he's drunk. To everyone's surprise, she pulls out a photo of Yuki dressed up cutely as a girl, taken during one of his drunken moments, much to the group's delight. Hirose is utterly shocked when she sees the picture of Yuki, prompting Tamaki to gleefully explain that at his own welcome party, they had dressed him up like a girl after he got drunk. With an innocent smile, she cheekily wished he'd get drunk again so she could see his adorable face once more. Embarrassed, Yuki quickly reminds her that she had forced him to drink on that occasion. Despite his reluctance, he downs a full glass of beer, and soon after, his cute drunken state resurfaces, prompting the girls around him to excitedly take pictures. Meanwhile, Igarashi remains focused on his tablet as usual, deeply engrossed in his work. However, his eyes widen and he looks up immediately when someone announces the arrival of Dr. Ann. She walks in with a slightly sad expression, apologizing for being late. Igarashi, on the other hand, lights up upon seeing her, finding her casual appearance even more beautiful. Ogura waves her over, proudly mentioning that he saved her a seat between him and Igarashi. As Dr. Ann sits down beside him, Igarashi's nerves escalate. She glances at him sorrowfully, but remains silent, which only adds to his anxiety. After a few minutes, and once everyone has had their meal, Dr. Ann raises her glass and formally welcomes both Hirose and Igarashi to the hospital. Everyone follows suit, raising their glasses to cheer. However, Igarashi and Ogorov simply lift their glasses without saying a word, and Dr. Ann quietly finishes her drink without any expressions. As she lowers her gaze, gathering the courage to speak, both Hirose and Igarashi brace themselves, certain that they are about to be scolded. She begins by addressing the issue of the inaccurate scans that had compromised the diagnosis, for which the newcomers were responsible. The entire table is left stunned when Dr. Ann unexpectedly apologizes for her previous attitude. She admits that she had wrongly assumed the radiologic technologists only took pictures based on the manual, while doctors handled the more critical aspects. Hirose is equally surprised yet relieved when Dr. Ann offers her advice as a clinical radiologic technologist. She emphasizes the importance of realizing that the scans Hirose takes have a profound impact on patients' lives. With a warm smile, Dr. Ann encourages her to continue practicing, assuring her that one day she will become an expert. Amakasu then turns to Igarashi, who trembles with anxiety. His eyes widen in shock as she praises him and urges him to continue his excellent work. Feeling a flood of emotions, his eyes well up with tears as he almost spills the beans about his childhood promise to help her. Just as he's about to spill the tea, Dr. Ann shoots him a death glare, reminding him to steer clear of the mammogram room, emphasizing that yesterday's exception was just that, an exception. She sternly admonishes him, making it clear that he cannot escape the consequences of his reckless behavior. Despite the tension, the atmosphere lightens as they all begin to chat and laugh, enjoying the rest of the evening together. The next day at the hospital, Haruta is brimming with joy, tears glistening in his eyes as Maki smiles and informs him that her reports are excellent. The doctors had advised her to return in 6 months for a routine checkup. As they leave the hospital, elated, he notices Ms. Chiba seated in the waiting area with her son. He recalls her presence on their first day at the hospital when she had informed the receptionist that her son's legs were hurting and shared her struggles about not being able to take days off. As he glances back at the boy's sad face, Maki asks if everything is all right. He replies that it's nothing. The following day, Igarashi, still haunted by Dr. Anne's scolding from the previous night, finds himself deeply disappointed. Her harsh words replay in his mind, leaving him feeling as though she hasn't forgiven him. He recalls the promise she made to him during their childhood, where she demanded that he become a technologist to help her, and now he feels helpless, torn by the memory as he prepares for another scan of an elderly woman. As Igarashi is lost in thought, the door opens, bringing him back to reality. The elderly woman enters the room, clutching her smartphone. Without thinking, Igarashi scolds her for bringing it in. However, the woman, looking at a picture of her dog on the phone, explains with a sorrowful expression that she suffers from claustrophobia. The only thing that comforts her is a picture of her dog, Lucky, as she can't bring the dog with her. She pleads with Igarashi to bend the rules a little, hoping for some leniency. Though Igarashi understands her fear and her attachment to the dog, he feels powerless to help her in this situation. Just then, Technician Inu enters the room. With a dull expression, he asks the woman what the issue is. The moment she sees him, her face flushes with embarrassment, and she shyly denies there being any problem. But when Igarashi explains her need to see her dog's picture during the MRI, the elderly woman, now blushing and smiling, affectionately suggests that she could manage if Inu would stand beside her and whisper in her ear. With a bit of hesitation, he agrees, offering his presence to calm her. After they leave, Igarashi suddenly gets an idea. He remembers how, during their childhood, Dr. N had treated her dog, Ray, and how she had wished for Igarashi to become a technologist to support her. Excited, he thinks that reminding her of this moment, perhaps by mentioning a dog, could help rekindle their connection. However, he struggles to remember the dog's name. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Ms. Chiba sits quietly, her sadness palpable. Hirose calls her in for her son's X-ray. In the interpretation room, Dr. Anne is deeply focused on a scan, finding nothing wrong. She moves on to examine Chiba Kenteru's X-ray next, but momentarily shifts her attention when Onodera enters with a file, greeting her with a good morning. Recognizing the X-ray of Kenteru, Onodera steps closer and mentions that they've done all the necessary scans, but everything appears normal, even though the boy is still in pain. After the MRI, the elderly woman emerges, visibly shaken but relieved that she managed to complete the scan with the technician's support. However, her relief quickly turns to panic as she realizes her dog is missing. She frantically searches for her beloved pet, her worry palpable. Meanwhile, the adventurous dog, having freed itself, wanders through the hospital. Igarashi stumbles upon the playful pup and, concerned for its owner, begins to search for the dog's caregiver. As he walks, memories of his childhood surface, reminding him of Dr. Anne's promise. Dr. Anne, folding the sleeves of her coat, balances a shopping bag overflowing with candies and chocolates. She happily munches on a sweet treat, recharging for the demanding work ahead. Spotting a gloomy Chiba sitting on a bench, she approaches with a warm smile, inquiring about his parents as she settles down beside him. With a downcast expression, he explains that his mother had to return to work, but will be back to pick him up. Curious, she asks for his name and quickly realizes he's the same boy whose X-ray she had just examined. She gently checks in on his well-being, asking if he's still in pain. When he shakes his head, relief washes over her. She assures him that she personally reviewed his X-ray, and there's no issue. His discomfort is simply a normal part of growing up. Noticing a magazine he's clutching from the hospital, Dr. N engages him in conversation to brighten his spirits. He apologizes for taking it, explaining that his mother contributes to the magazine. Dr. N feels impressed, acknowledging that his mother must be a busy and wonderful woman. Yet she can sense Chiba's gloom, knowing his mother has had to take time off work for him. With a reassuring smile, she gently taps his head and tells him he's more important to his mother than anything else. Her kindness lights up his face. Then, reaching into her shopping bag, she offers him the chance to choose any chocolate he desires, spreading joy in his moment of sadness. As Igarashi walks by with Lucky, the dog, he musters the courage to present the pup to Dr. Ann. Though Lucky isn't the same as the childhood dog she cherished, Igarashi holds it up with hopeful embarrassment. Chiba's eyes widen in shock as he sees the dog while holding a chocolate. Without saying a word, Dr. Ann affectionately pats Chiba's head, reminding him to take care of himself before she walks away. However, as Igarashi tries to follow her, he notices her fierce glare directed at him, clearly indicating her dislike for dogs. He stands frozen, overwhelmed with shock and disappointment, then sinks to the ground in despair. Just then, the elderly woman who had been searching for her dog calls out, accusing him of stealing Lucky, whom she had been desperately seeking. Meanwhile, Dr. Ann is left with bittersweet memories of her childhood dog, Ray, stirring emotions within her. After failing to jog Ann's memory about their childhood with a dog and being slapped by its owner, Igarashi is left emotionally wounded. Clutching his cheek where he was slapped, he begins to cry loudly, drawing the startled gaze of Chiba, who now views him as a strange person crying after being hit. After a moment, Igarashi turns to Chiba with a desperate expression and rushes towards him, hoping to learn what he had talked about with Dr. Ann. Chiba is initially frightened, but after seeing Igarashi's worried and emotional face, he nervously explains that she only spoke with him to make sure he was okay while he waited for his mom. Something clicks in Igarashi's mind when he hears this, and he becomes sad. Chiba tells that he had an X-ray taken for his knees today. As Igarashi recalls something from his childhood, he excitedly asks Chiba to repeat what he said. After asking 3 times, Chiba finally repeats that he had an X-ray. Igarashi, in a burst of excitement, shouts with joy as he realizes that their childhood dog was named Ray, just like the X-ray. Full of enthusiasm, Igarashi plans to casually bring up the dog's name to remind Dr. Ann of their shared past. But his excitement quickly fades as he remembers her angry remark she doesn't like dogs, rendering the name useless. Gloomily, Igarashi sits down and apologizes to the kid for interrupting him, offering to listen to his story instead. Chiba, still feeling down, shares how Dr. Ann told him his knee pain was simply growing pains, but with a sad expression, he confesses that he lied to the doctor. It actually hurts a lot. Igarashi, confused, asks why he lied. Chiba hesitates and asks Igarashi to promise not to make fun of him for being childish. Before Chiba can finish, he starts laughing at how Igarashi cried over a slap, saying Igarashi is even more childish than him. Feeling a connection, Igarashi becomes emotional when Chiba reveals that his parents are divorced and his mother is always busy with work. He just wants someone to care about him, even though he knows it's childish. Igarashi, understanding his pain, pats him on the head and admits that his parents also got divorced when he was in 3rd grade. Chiba looks at him with surprise, realizing they shared the same experience as his parents also separated when he was in 3rd grade. Chiba continues, explaining that 4 years ago, his mother became seriously ill, and though she recovered, his grandmother passed away from a brain tumor. He believes this is why his body constantly hurts. He also shares that his parents fought frequently when he was a baby, which may have impacted him. Moving by Chiba's story, Igarashi pats his back to comfort him. Realizing Igarashi is not a bad guy, the boy confides that he was anxious about bothering his mom with his needs, but Dr. Ann reassured him that he wasn't a burden. Igarashi, feeling relieved, realizes she is a kind person. He then tells Igarashi that he decided to hide his pain so his mother could focus on her work, hoping one day they could all be together as a family again. With a cute smile, he mentions that his father is a really nice person. As they talk, Chiba's mother approaches, relieved to see her son is okay. However, he becomes depressed when his mother scolds him for wasting time, saying she'll have to make it up by working later in the week. When she turns and locks eyes with Igarashi, both are shocked, as she recalls their first encounter in the mammography room. Although Hirose tries to calm her down, explaining that Igarashi is one of the hospital's technologists, she angrily moves toward her son. While watching her, something clicks in Igarashi's mind. Recalling what Chiba said about his grandmother's brain tumor, he realizes there might be something more serious going on. As Kentaru's mother grabs his hand to leave, Igarashi quickly places a hand on Chiba's shoulder, asking if his knees hurt too much. She yells at him for touching her son, while he looks worried, unsure how his mother found out about his pain. As she pulls him away, shouting and threatening to expose Igarashi in her articles, she suddenly stops when Igarashi asks if anyone else in her family had cancer at a young age. She angrily tightens her grip on Chiba's hand, about to storm off when Igarashi warns that it's important for Chiba's health. She hesitates, then with a somber expression reveals that her sister passed away from cancer. Both Kentaro and his mother are struck with concern when Igarashi suggests they get an MRI of Chiba's knees as soon as possible, as their family might be affected by Lee-Fraumeni syndrome.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand, I know I walked away.